I love the energy in here. You guys, to see those who continue to come back to Startup Grind and to see the brand new faces, it is a privilege to be able to get up here and be able to help facilitate a conversation about an amazing entrepreneur's dream. Melody McCray-Miller, you can go ahead and make your way up. And when I tell you, this woman has been a fixture in my life for a very long time. The good thing about the Wichita community is that we are a community. Have a seat.
You were able to do it so slick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know they're tall chairs. Here, I'll hold it for you.
And I am definitely short. And then I have a dress on. So it's like...
This is what I mean with community. She has been part of my community for a very, very long time. If you read her professional bio, you may see that she did a stint in the state. She did a stint in politics. She was also on the county commission. She is just a wonderful community advocate working on not only business issues, but also she is working on a very important health equity issue with infant mortality, particularly among African Americans. There's a lot of compelling data and really sobering stories around that work, and she's helping to spread the light in hopes to be able to get those rates down so that we can, again, begin to see more healthy and full-term pregnancies and births in the African American community. So we have a lot to hear from her today, and I am not going to belabor it any longer. We are up here cute and comfortable. Melody, welcome to Startup Grind.
Thank you, Christina Long.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So for those of you who may not have had the privilege like I've had to kind of get to know you, tell us what it was like for you to grow up in your household.
You know, can I first just thank everyone that's here?
Go ahead. Already off script.
Yes, that's such is my life. But I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for filling the seats. It fills my heart to see as many individuals that have come to hear about me, our business, and then to also see the phenomenal Christina Long. So thank you.
Absolutely. So again, we always talk about where did the inspiration for entrepreneurship come from? What was living like little Melody like?
Well, you would have to ask my older sister what it was like living with little Melody. But no, I am not ashamed. I was so blessed in my upbringing, and the parents that I have had, they're still with me spiritually. I can say this, that as a couple, they definitely groomed me for whatever life was going to bring. And how did you do that? You might be asking, or how did they do that? Well, I would say that my father was a diplomat and my mother was the grit. So I was able to harness both sides of that and become an individual that fights for what I think is right, but I also have a lot of diplomacy and what I would say compassion and empathy when looking at issues that affect and impact people. And that was instilled in me from a very, very early age and a very nurturing upbringing, and it was really familial. It was my family, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity to grow up in a loving family in a beautiful neighborhood that embraced every child. Didn't matter who you were, where you came from, what you did. That was a time where communities truly did. It was a village that grew children up and embraced and held them.
Absolutely. So you studied, again, you went through college and things of that nature, and you began a career in education. Mm-hmm. We've been celebrating Teacher Appreciation Week. Tell us about your time in education.
Oh, my. You know, persons always ask me what has been the most important part of your career, and I don't hesitate at all. My learning and my I would say, building ground was teaching. And either you loved it or you didn't. And I'm really talking about middle school, because that's where I'm testifying up here, right, Michelle? Either you loved it or you hated it. And I loved it. I loved those children, babies trying to grow up and still needing that nurturing. So it was wonderful for me to get in that classroom. Just a little bit. The first day that I was there, oh my gosh, by lunchtime, I was shell-shocked. I was sitting in my classroom and I was like, I couldn't even talk. What just happened? Yeah. But by the end of the day, the end of the week, and the end of the year, I absolutely loved it. I went on to teach also high school, went back to Southeast High. We got any Buffs out there? Buffaloes? One? You're the important one, absolutely. So, Golden Buffaloes, whoop, whoop, 1974. And I went back and taught there. Still loved my Mayberry middle schoolers. Mm-hmm. So it was another opportunity for me to grow and build and acquire a skill set that really allowed me to do everything that I do. You do everything as a teacher, absolutely everything. There is nothing the teachers can't do or don't do.
Yeah. So again, having that education skill set, and then also being exposed from a very early age as well to the political arena. Mm-hmm. You had a father who was very, very deeply ingrained in Kansas politics and did some incredible things. Do you want to just brag on your daddy for just a second?
Billy Q. Mm-hmm. Billy McCray. He did so much for this community. And it wasn't, he was a politician. He was a better politician, I think, than I was, politically, politician. But he really, really knew how to feel the pulse of a community and to garner the support of either the powers that be that he needed to be able to connect with, and also rally the community behind him on different issues. Fair housing was one. There were so many. The Good Samaritan Act that you know of now, when you can not throw out food and or you don't have to toss food, but instead you can gift it. You can give it to a nonprofit. Really, Billy McCray was behind that. It was Billy McCray and current former state senator Bob Dole. When you're looking at the senior services, this is Billy McCray that started that. So there were just so many, but he was so humble and so much humility, and that's the other thing that I'm so thankful that I was exposed to, that it's difficult for me to boast. It's just not my natural thing to do, but and I think that probably came from Daddy. But he was the man. I mean, he did so many things, and growing up in that, you don't necessarily see it until you're much older. He was just Daddy. Yeah. Daddy who loved me, loved us. Yeah. But as I grew and when I went into politics, I'm like, woof, my gosh, how did you do this?
So you just said, how did he do this? But Melody, let's fill in the gaps for folks about going from education to, again, watching and growing up and seeing your father do all this and then deciding, you know what, I want to do this. What was that tipping point for you that made you say, yes, I want to do this?
That's a great question. No, I didn't want to do it because I saw how hard Daddy worked. I saw how many hours he put into it. People were always calling. He was always answering the phone. He was always gone. He was always doing for someone. He did for us, don't get me wrong, by any way, shape, or form. But he was always doing for people. And I'm like, I don't want to do that when I was young. I have too many other things that I could be working on and doing. And then the bug hit. It hit, actually, I worked on a campaign. This was when Larry and I, my late husband, we lived in Houston, and I was working on a campaign, and I was like, oh my goodness, I think I'm gonna run for office. It just all of a sudden popped into my mind that, yep, I'm gonna do this. I can run for office. And we moved back to Wichita in the interim, and I did run. I ran for, actually, Daddy was back. He was working, he was a county commissioner. He had left the Senate after 27 years, the Senate and the House, and came back to Wichita. Mom was not well, and he wanted to spend time here. And so I said, okay, he vacated the county commission seat. I said I was going to run for it. In the precinct race, I ran. I lost. Devastating. But at that moment, the tenacious person that I can be, I said, that's okay. I'm going to dust myself off. That's all right. And I'm going to run outright where people can see who I am, that I'm not just running in my dad's footsteps, that I'm my own person, and that I want to work for you. So ran for county commissioner, won by 37% because it was a three-way Democratic primary. And so I won by a plurality, and then I ran, of course, in the general election and handedly defeated the Republican that was running at the time. Served one term, which is 4 years, and then that's when I went on to run for the House, the 89th district seat. And all the time that I was doing that, Miller's Barbecue.
Yes, Miller's Barbecue.
Miller's Barbecue.
So I wanted to take them a little bit through that. So again, there's several of us in the room. I know many of you all, but we have conversations about, am I where I'm supposed to be? Mm-hmm. I feel kind of stuck, but do I have the skill set to really jump? Here you are. You have navigated education, middle and high school. You're navigating politics, and here comes Miller's. Talk about the early days of the restaurant.
The early days of the restaurant. So couple, parents, nurture, built the groundwork. Husband, Larry, extraordinary. I heard that word. Extraordinary and extraordinary. Very driven and knew forever that he was going to open his own business. And of course, I'm doing everything else that I'm doing, and I'm saying, and I'm right behind you. I will support it. We will do this. So Miller's was family-owned, family-run, best barbecue this side of wherever. And yes, so we ran that business. Really, it was family that ran it. My 3 daughters, I have one of my granddaughters here. My grandbabies, we kept them in the back room. I don't know what your story is, but I can tell you mine. So with a small business, once again, just like in that classroom, you do everything. Mm-hmm. And the family comes right along with you. I see another legend. I see another legacy business owner back there, and I'm talking about James Barfield. So you know that you are going to do this, and you know that you are each other's support system. So Miller's was the best. We were the best at what we did. We loved people. You could see it in our plates. You could see it in our eyes. You know, when you would come in, we would be working hard. Yep. But it just was, what can I say? It was a family-run business. And anyone that does that knows that. Anyone that knows restaurant, you know that that's hard. Mm-hmm. So we did that for 13 years. I have to think for 96 to 2005.
You can say those dates out loud.
Oh, okay. It's actually, you probably already heard them because I have this microphone right here. 96 to 2005.
Now, before you go on, Melody.
And really, that was once we went to the freestanding business, but before that, we were doing the trailer. We had a trailer.
But how did you know it was going to be, or how did he decide it was going to be a restaurant? Right. You said he wanted to own a business. How did you all decide it was going to be a restaurant?
It was a strength area of his was barbecuing, and I was I did the baked beans at first. They were my sweet baked beans. But then somebody said, "Man, you got to spice these beans up." So I didn't get it didn't hurt, It's like okay. So there was a suggestion of putting the beef in it. And so that's where it came from. It came from people. It came from customers that said, "This is what try this. We think this will be great." And so, Larry started to put the beef brisket off into my sweet bean recipe, and then the rest is history about the baked beans.
That's amazing. So you identified early, again, the skill area that you all were strong in, decided it was going to be restaurants.
Food, restaurant.
It's one thing, though, to say you want a business, and then another thing to actually launch it. What was you all's launch story?
So I heard somebody else say this. I thought, just do it. We didn't hesitate. We didn't try to find the perfect timing, the perfect location, the perfect place. No. Just do it. If you have a concept, if you have a product that you believe in and that you've already tested, you've had your test market. It's either going to be your family, your friends, and everybody else that you share this product with, and they say it's good, it's great. Mm-hmm. Just do it. You're either going to sink or swim. And then you're going to learn from both of those and keep moving it forward if you feel that that's what you want to continue to do. So we started out with a trailer, and that was our test market. That was going to fairs and festivals and having lines of people that stand out. I see some heads nodding, having lines of people stand out. And telling us that we want to get this barbecue all the time. So, there was your feedback, and I tell people all the time that, so how do you engage with your customer? We listened. Every time people would tell us different things, it didn't go in one ear and out the other. It resonated, and we attempted to move our business in that direction in order to be the best and to reflect who it is that was keeping us in business. So we didn't do a lot of advertisement. You know what our advertisement was. It was word of mouth. Seriously, it really was. We did some, but we had a grassroots word of mouth that just spread and kept circling out and circling out and circling out. These are different times. Yeah. Everything is digital, electronic, and we were just talking about social media. So I've had to move that direction too with the baked bean product. But word of mouth was really a key for us.
Let me ask this. I always like to do an audience check. For those of us who do own businesses, if your business is under 5 years old, will you please raise your hand? Look at that.
I see.
All right. And then, of course, for those who own businesses that are older than 5 years old, will you raise your hand?
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Wow, it's a pretty good mix.
It is. So you mentioned something that was really important, and let me do a quick foreshadowing, and then we're going to come back to what I'm going to ask you. But foreshadowing, the beans are in stores across the nation.
Yes.
Okay? The beans are the bomb. All right. But you mentioned the trailer. You were going across to the parks and fairs, and there were lines everywhere. That was good. It probably felt good. When did you guys decide, you know what, good is not good enough,
Right.
and you decided to transition to a building? Because some of us, for those of us who are in that, well, I'm 6 years old now, but for those 5 years and under, once we hit that groove, we're getting those clients in, it's just good enough for us. We're feeling good about it. How then do we know it's time to stretch?
Right. Wow. For my emerging leaders folk, we were just talking about this. Can I get a whoop whoop out there? There they are. Oh, and yeah, in the background, we're just talking about this. So for us, what we basically, what hit us was, okay, so Mel, are you going to be able to do this and keep your job? Or how much time? In other words, we started to grapple with, we need to be doing this full time. We can't do this part time anymore. There's a demand out there. Tired of working for someone else, quote unquote. We need to figure out how we can do this full time. And so to me, that was the first decision that we had to make. Larry had to say, I'm quitting where I'm at. And I had to say, and I'm right, we've got this. We will make this happen. We're going full time. We're going to open our business. We had to, look at seeking funding, look for a reasonable site that had good, was a location that had good visibility and access to parking, because it's a restaurant, remember? So we did those. We checked and ticked off those items, and then we just took the dive. We took the dive with the help of an SBA loan initially. I know that there's additional and different types of funding that's available. So, SBA is still there, and then there's also alternative funding that would be accessible. From there, it just took off. The product itself, we knew, like I said, we had test marketed it, so we knew it was a good product, and then it was just the demand and having to adjust and make sure that we could actually manage the amount of business that we were getting. And once again, from a mom and pop restaurant, that can be challenging. So we did have some hiccups at the beginning.
Talk about one of them, please.
Oh, it would just being able to gauge the amount of product to have in order to keep it fresh, as opposed to holding things over and selling it, during the rest of the week. We were a fresh product business, so you had to learn to gauge that. Of course, from a margins perspective, we had to get a hold on our waste, and then we had to also be able to figure out and make sure that we weren't killing ourselves in terms of the number of hours that a restaurant would take, or the demand that is people would demand of the restaurant and having access to the product. So we went from 6 days a week, and this was what we were able to do. And if you recall, some of your better and your best small business, family-owned barbecue restaurants are only open certain hours and certain days of the week. Yeah. So that is what we figured out that would work for our business.
Well, you all hit your stride, and it was great. It was so good. I will say this before we segue into, again, things were good, your next stretch, the product piece. It was so good. My mother was taking carry out one time. She went through the drive-thru, and she took out, you guys remember Ford Aerostars? She took out a whole panel of our Ford Aerostar because she built too closely by the building. So anytime we think about your restaurant, we think about the panel, and my mom just... She was unhappy, but we were well fed that night. So, right.
Yeah, people used to go over that hump.
Yeah.
It was like,
that's okay. That's all right. It was worth it. So the restaurant was going well. When did you guys decide that, you know what, the beans, out of everything we do, the beans can really carry us to the next phase in our business development?
So once again, restaurant business can be very, very labor intense, and I'd say 5 years in, we were getting tired. It was like, oh, geez. And we were noticing that people would just come and buy pints, quarts, gallons of baked beans. And in fact, we had people that, and I can think of one customer in particular, that would come and purchase a pint, and she would go out in the lobby and just eat it right there. They were good. Those beans were good. And so, yes, she would eat it right there. And she was a regular customer. And so there was an individual that we knew. Actually, his name is Ernie Barnes. And other people would tell us, you ought to just market these beans. But Ernie Barnes, at the time, he was a health inspector for the state of Kansas. And he said, you know what? You all really ought to consider marketing these baked beans. And I got the perfect place that could help you develop them, from the kitchen recipe to a formula. And it was K-State. We got any K-Staters out there? Oh, got some finger snaps. Okay. Doop, doop. So K-State, Dr. Fadi Aramani and Dr. Liz Boyle, they did a phenomenal job with us. It was like our getaway time to make a batch of the beans, drive up 135 and hit I-70 and go on into Manhattan, and then leave the baked beans and then let them do what they do best. And that process took probably a good 6 months, but it didn't seem like that. And they were able to batch it. They were able to match our kitchen recipe and bulk it up to a formula so that any co-packer, or if we were to develop a manufacturing business ourselves, that we would have an actual formula that we could use that would render the same quality of product anytime we would go, anytime we would actually follow that formula. And they did the nutritional analysis, and they even linked us with possible co-packers that could pack the product for us.
That's amazing. So what came next? You had the recipe, the co-packing, all of that seemed to go well. What was next?
Well, next I had to market it. And that was my job. That was my task, because I was more the front face person. Larry liked doing what he did. And so of course, who do you think I went to first? What stores do you think I went to first? Dillon's, yeah. So it was just automatic. And so when I made an appointment with the deli category manager, and when I popped in, she said, "We already know who you are," and I'm like, but it wasn't my political background; it was Miller's. And they said, so this was the story, and she said, "You know what? We get your beans and your meats for our annual picnic, and that is what our cookout every year. We've been doing that forever." She said, Dave Dillon, and he was the CEO of Kroger at the time, but former CEO of Dillon's, and all of the other upper line managers, that's the only thing that they would get. Was the Miller meat products and, of course, the baked beans. So they said, of course, we'll bring your product in. It was just that slam dunk. And I was like, oh, my goodness, really? And so she said, absolutely. And, of course, if the product wasn't a viable product with quality controls and with a lead co-packer, they wouldn't have taken it. So we had taken the steps that we needed in order to not only develop the product, but have the product in a marketing, packaging, and a distribution line. So that's where we all started. And I was just talking with them. I just went to go back and tell them about the product having the 20 years. because it started in 1999, and here we are in 2019. And I was saying we've been together for 20 years. It started all right here in Kansas, in Hutchinson, and the Dillon's Market.
That's right. Can we give her a hand for that? That's incredible. You know, you might have gotten there yourself with the idea of product packaging, but it's really interesting where inspiration can hit. So in our own past, every single person in this place, there is somebody who's championing and cheerleading for you, somebody who's been offering you inspiration. For them, it was a health inspector that then led, again, to the steps that ended up with the slam dunk. But not only that, we have the Miller's brand out there, but you also decided to do something else with your product, too, in terms of a different type of labeling. Tell them about that. The store brand?
Oh, look. So not only is the product, and most of you are familiar with private label, private select. So we have our product that's not only marketed under our brand, but it's also marketed under the Kroger brand. So we have a private select. Had to go through a process. That didn't just happen slam dunk. That was a process where I was on pins and needles waiting to find out the decision, because what had happened was we made an appointment. I sent a letter. It was answered by this CEO at the time, Dave Dillon, scheduled an appointment where we would go and actually meet with him. I've always been the type of person to go to the top. It's just who I am. So I sent the letter. Larry said, absolutely we wrote the letter. I mailed the letter, got a phone call back. Well, sure, you can come on up here. We know your product well, love it. It's doing very well in our Dillon stores. And at the time, what I wanted to be able to do was also branch out into the Kroger market. So, and I wanted to look at private select. And so what Dave Dillon was able to do was put it in progress. But he let me know clearly. He said, there's no way, I don't make the decision. There's no way that you even want my fingerprints anywhere near this, because category managers make their own decisions. And so he says, I'll make sure that the process is started, and gave me the individual that I needed to contact. And from there, I just, bird dogged it. I just moved it right along, just hung right with it, and finally did get the email at that time. I finally got an email that said, your product was selected. So I went through an actual selection process with 4 other baked bean products, and it's carried in King Soopers. Are you familiar? King Soopers, Colorado and Wyoming, and yeah. And so it's their private select, and some in Ralph's, and there's there's also some in, say it again? Baker's. Yeah. Is it my brand in Baker's, or is it the?
She's got to ask.
Okay, so.
Shoot, that's all right.
Yeah. So that was another coup. It really was. But another tip from entrepreneur to entrepreneur is I take calculated risk all the time. I said calculated risk all the time. I am not risk averse. You can't be. You can't be, but you have to be calculated and do your due diligence, do your homework, know your markets, and I'm not, I'm talking from a foodie, a food person, and then get out there.
Let me ask you this before we get ready to segue into audience questions, because I know there's plenty. When you think about how Wichita is a benefit to your company, Could you describe what type of benefit operating from Wichita as a home base has been for you all?
Well, location for one. It's centrally located. So distribution line, the truck lines that we have, because my product, I didn't share this, and those that aren't familiar with it, it's a refrigerated product. Don't go looking on no shelf for a can. That I have to do it like that because a lot of people are like, "Well, I didn't see your product. Where did you look?" On the can, the aisle, and I'm like, "No, it's a fresh product. It's in your deli." So the distribution line, it has to be in a refrigerated truck, and bring me back.
Why Wichita was a benefit?
Centrally located. So I don't have a problem with being directed back. So it is manufactured by the largest cold pressed product manufacturer, and that is Reese's Fine Foods. They've been phenomenal. They have been great over all these years. I have not had a problem. I've had my product. Co-packers have tried to steal the product before. So once I got, there's all sorts of caveats out there from a business perspective. I'm sure some of you are aware of that. But when I chose Reese's has their co-packing plants, their manufacturing plants strategically located. Center is Topeka. The west is Beaverton, Oregon, which is their flagship, and then Halifax, North Carolina on the East Coast. So most of my product comes out of the factory in Topeka. So location was great, but it's also, Wichita's my home base. So I was able to, I think, pull upon the relationships that I had built, the excitement and enthusiasm that not only me as an individual, but our business had promoted over time. So it was, I think it already had a history and credibility before we even began to market it nationally. So I think that those that are located, my relationships from the Wichita area were able to help me forge and build relationships even beyond because of the connections.
That's wonderful. Before I ask you the last question that I'll pitch to you, and I'm going to give it to you so you can think about it, and then I got to editorialize for just a second. But the question is this: out of every lesson that you've learned, what is the most important that you want to give our audience? So think about that.
Okay.
To you all, as she's thinking, let me ask you guys this. From those of us who were customers, how many of us had heard about Melody's story about packing and growing the beans anywhere in the community? Just a couple. And so the amazing thing about Startup Grind is it gives a platform to be able to hear the backstory, because I tell you, it wasn't until I was in the business community that I started to think about how many business owners and their backstories do we just walk past? Do we just not even know because there's not an outlet to be able to do that? She should have been celebrated a long time ago for what they've been able to accomplish and the way that they were able to accomplish it in Wichita. And we knew her in the community, in my community, as just, oh, that's Melody. No, that's Melody, and you're a great person, but oh my gosh, there are so many more lessons in the business world and the entrepreneurship spirit that we could have gained from you a long time ago. So I am grateful, Jacob, for this platform. I'm grateful for you all being here 20 years to celebrate and be able to tell your story, and you've got to tell it. You have to market it. Yes. Humble is done.
I agree.
You need to go forward. So now I'm done preaching. What do you want to leave them with?
Sometimes, how can I say this? Failure, what appears to be failure can sting, and even stop you from going any further. what I found in my trajectory, on my journey, was that success is not linear. It doesn't go in a straight line. I mean, we want it to. Ooh, we want it to. And sometimes we'll stop and start because that's what we are seeking, is that straight line of success. No failures, no downturns, no barriers. But you're going to get all of that, all of it. And instead of looking at it as a failure, really what I had to figure out was to just use it as a learning tool to success. And I'm sure you've heard that before, but that was my lesson learned, because I really wanted things to just go perfectly. I didn't want any of the other stuff to happen. But as I look back and moving forward, I just embrace it. I embrace it as an opportunity to keep building me for success.
Can we give her a hand?
Thank you.
You already know the drill, don't you?
This is Q&A time.
Okay.
So as a person who lived right down the street, we knew when Miller's was about to open because we had smell-o-vision, and we could smell it all morning, and then we knew about what time to go up the street, because you started in the small little hut where
That's
everybody
right.
was kind of outside.
That's right.
And then moved across. But I guess my question is, how did you make the decision to actually close the physical building? And I know that there were a lot of situations around that.
Right.
But because you had other people that were helping with that, how did you make that decision, knowing that the beans were going well and there were lots of other things that could happen, but how did you decide, hey, we need to go ahead and shut down this physical building?
Michelle, that's an excellent question. Once again, I think that dovetails very nicely into a emerging leaders business class that I and others that are here are engaged in. So we had already planned, Larry and I had already planned to close the stationery business. That was one of we wanted the baked bean product to eclipse our freestanding brick and mortar restaurant. Why? Because it was hard work. It was very, and I bet some are thinking, okay, so well, why didn't you just hire other people? Well, we did, and just as we talk about in a business class, they just, it's difficult to find someone that has the same passion, that treats your product the same way as you do, so you burn yourself and or your family members and a few top-notch key business associates and staff out. So we purposely planned for the baked bean product to eclipse the restaurant. And the circumstances that occurred allowed that to happen that much quicker.
Other questions? Oh.
From the time you said you had your trailer and you were preparing to open up a store or an actual restaurant, a bigger restaurant, and you talked about you had a little bit of fear of, you knew that you already had a steady customer flow. How did you overcome your fear of how you were going to handle if it was successful? Because I think that
Right.
a lot of people have a fear of failure, but there's also a fear of success, wondering how you're going to be able to handle it if things go really well.
Right. Being overwhelmed, right, with business?
Right.
I'm going to be very blunt honest. We didn't have a plan. We didn't. Calculated risk taker, but we didn't have a plan. So those were opportunities to revamp and figure out how to best manage the overwhelming demand that really did happen. But in time, it kind of subsided. It not subsided, but became more manageable because we were able to bring in other individuals and or adjust our schedule so that we could appropriately handle that demand. This is another great question.
Melanie, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate hearing your story. What do you think we, or beyond us, the city could do to help create more success stories like yours?
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, I was not prepared for that. Jeez.
You win.
So what can, just to continue, not just, but, so the city. What sector of the city? Remember, I have a political mind also. So where? What part? Okay. I do too. So I think recognizing that you have homegrown. As Christina has said, I mean, it's not, many of you know me well, so I was doing other things. We were doing other things. There were other things that were going on at the same time, and I've always been the type of person that I've juggled multiple things at one time. And in fact, I think that I'm addicted to that. Oh my gosh, did I say that? Did I? So, to recognize that you have homegrown. And from a small business perspective, and as a legislator, I really tried to push for incentives for homegrown small businesses that are retailers. All of the incentives go to manufacturing for the most part. There's really no incentive structure. There's no real packaging that looks at the pitfalls and the challenges that impact and affect a retailer, particularly a food retailer. So if that could happen, I think that would be a definite plus for being able to not only allow them to thrive, but to thrive and flourish. Thank you for that question.
Question here to your right.
Okay, Mel, you're a woman after my own heart. You almost led to the question I wanted to ask you just in your last answer. You juggle multiple things. So you have been in the community as a community advocate. You've been, a representative. You've been a business owner. And I'm a person that loves to juggle a lot of things. And I'm in a space in my life, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not on your level. I'm trying to get there. But do I cut back? Do I cut back on some of my passions? I wanted to know, how did you manage all of the passions that you have effectively so that you didn't burn out?
Wow. Marquita, that is key, I think, for any entrepreneur, any budding entrepreneur, any person of passion. Because there's so many of you that I could point to. Some of you have your head down right now. You know who you are, that have so much on your plate. But the reason why is because you are passionate, because you care. It matters. From a business perspective, you're going to have to look at what the return on investment is for each one of those areas. And I say this with love, but at some point you are going to have to condense, narrow, and focus. Otherwise, you're doing some of those a disservice. I said I sent it with love. It just is.
So the final question from our community. So you've given us a lot tonight with insight, inspiration, but what can we as a community do to help you?
Oh, wow. Any leads that you have for additional markets,
Truth right there.
Very good.
seriously.
Hey, always be
Or-
closing.
and purchase the product right there in your friendly neighborhood Dillons. No, but thank you. Thank you, because you didn't have to, and thank you, Christina, because none of this had to happen. It happened because people cared enough to bring this story forward. So thank you, and thank you for being here.
Let's give a round of applause.